This is my discussion slash review for 911 Lone Star Season 4, Episode 16, titled A House Divided. And there was a lot of twists and turns this episode. Let's talk about it.
Live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings, I'm a big fight.
Right off rip, I'm going to talk about Tommy and Judd. Now, we see this episode that Tommy, Judd, Wyatt, and his girlfriend, and Grace, and Pastor, like, they're having a game night. And that was fun and cool and everything. I enjoyed that part. But we also see that, Owen is still dealing with his brother in town, and he's getting ready to take him back to California. But Judd is in charge of the firehouse right now. Judd is acting captain, and him and Tommy are joking about it and everything. And then that leads us into the very first case this episode, and we see that they have a call at a paper mill, and everything seems to be going routine. And then boom, bam, an explosion is, well, it's very evident. Like these two machines that's in the paper mill are starting on the verge of exploding. And Judd orders an evacuation, and Tommy ignores it and stays in there to try to save this dude. And then Judd has to rush in and try to save her because she ignored the order that he gave, because he is acting captain and the incident commander for that fire. She ignored it and decided to stay and help this guy. Now, in the toss-up of it all, I kind of feel like it's 50-50, but at the same time, you got to look at it like this. Judd was the IC, so when he gives an order, Tommy has to recognize that order and act on it. You know what I'm saying? But I understand where she was coming from as well. She tried her hardest to save this guy, but like Judd said, we tried and we failed. And it's sad that the dude still died anyway, but I get where Tommy's coming from, and I get where Judd is coming from, because Judd went in after her to save her, and they were very close to the explosion, and Judd just came in there and just lopped that man's arm off with the axe, and then they got out. But the part is, Judd was IC, and when he gives an order, everybody has to follow that order. And that's the part that I'm leaning more towards than even so if Tommy was trying to save this dude's life and him still ending up dying. Now, that's what one of the premises of this episode comes from, is them having a fight this entire episode because they just can't quite see eye to eye on this aspect. Judd tried to gauge Tommy and have a legitimate conversation with her, but she didn't want to hear that. They were going back and forth about it, and then they had a date night, right? Grace, Judd, Tommy, and Pastor Trevor. I think I might have said Pastor Tommy a while ago. But anyway, we see that that's their couple name, Pastor Tommy. But anyway, we see that Pastor Trevor and Grace are trying to convince Judd and Tommy to go out on this date because they are mad at each other. They ain't trying to hear it. Now, to be fair, when Judd was talking to Tommy about the entire situation, he did bring up her husband and was like, he was kind of fearful for her life. He didn't want to see her die because his goddaughters would be left alone. And sure, that was more of a guilt trip part to try to convince her that what she was doing was wrong. But like I said, this entire thing had me feeling 50-50, and the only reason I led over to Judd's side just a little bit more is because he was the incident commander. And we see that Trevor and Grace eventually get them to go on a date. They go on a date, and they started off nice, man. Grace was trying to intervene. Pastor Trevor was trying to intervene. And then Pastor Trevor got Grace. He got on Grace's nerves because he convinced Judd to kind of accept it was partially his fault and tried to make Tommy seem like she was the wonderful hero in the scenario. And Grace wasn't having that. And then Judd started pointing fingers at Pastor Trevor. Like, that whole scene was comedic, and I loved it, and it was fun and energetic. But then what I mean when this episode took a twist, because all that was fun and energetic, and we see that they were having a fight, but they were still, they still friends. They're still family. So this fight isn't that serious, but in that moment it's serious. You know what I'm saying? But what I mean, the episode switched and twisted is because we have all that going on, and we know Paul girlfriend comes in and starts to question Tommy and everything. But that's not the super serious part of this episode, because after all of that, we see that Wyatt got clipped in a car accident, and like, he's really messed up. And at the ending of the episode, we see Tommy and Judd kind of come together, and their differences really don't matter in this instance because it's all about Wyatt. And at the end of the day, they are family, no matter what, because we see that Tommy and Judd both kind of said that when the firehouse was kind of divided from the title, A House Divided. Firefighters were feeling some way. They were all on Judd's side, and the paramedics were all on Tommy's side, and that's fair. I mean, you know, you got to back up your captain in that kind of situation. But like Tommy said, you know, we may be, you know, separate, well, not separate houses, but on separate teams, but we are one house. We are family. You know what I'm saying? And they gotta acknowledge that. And both of them, that made Judd and Tommy kind of realize that in that moment, their fight was sort of silly, but Tommy decided to switch shifts so she wouldn't kind of be working with Judd. And the only thing I say about the entire situation is working with someone when you're family or friends sometimes tends to lead to the wrong kind of situation. So sometimes it works and then sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it really isn't working. So Tommy switched shifts until Owen comes back. But that wasn't like the highlight of this episode for me. I feel like one part of this entire episode really spoke volumes for me, and that's Owen and his brother's relationship. We see that, you know, Owen's going to take his brother back to California. He still hasn't told his family, but he decided he's going to tell them, and then he's going to travel back down to Texas for TK's wedding, and he wants Owen to help him die. Now, I don't know how Owen's going to react to that, but I feel like that's such a wonderful moment. Not him helping him die, but them having that time to spend together, to connect with each other, because they were robbed of a childhood and a life together, because, you know, they didn't end up growing up together. But they found each other, and they're going to get to spend that time together, even if it is such a tragic moment. But we also see this episode that Owen decided to check and see if he had the Huntington's gene. And turns out he doesn't. But one thing I didn't like about this episode was TK fretting the entire episode about him possibly having Huntington's. Now, I get it, because a lot of stuff has happened to TK, and he's very worrisome and fearful of something happening and him not being able to marry Carlos. But my thing is, you don't worry about it until there's reason to worry about it. And I figured the show writers wasn't going to let Owen have that gene because they wanted to give, you know, Owen already had cancer, and then TK hasn't really had let's say a wonderful life, because TK's had some trials and tribulations, man, getting shot and almost freezing to death and everything. So let's give TK a happy ending somewhere along in the storyline. You know what I'm saying? So I figured that wasn't going to be the case, but I didn't really like the fact that TK was just so worried this entire episode. I get it, because that's who his character is. I mean, that's not his only trait, but I understand that's who his character is. But I just didn't really like it, because there's no reason to worry about something until there's actually reason to worry about it. Because one thing Owen said that made a lot of sense is, like, TK was like, I'm so afraid of, like, you know, actually getting this death sentence. And like Owen said, everybody has a death sentence. You know, like, we all gonna end one day. You know what I'm saying? It's just whether different circumstances take us out or anything like that, you know, but we all got a death date eventually. But overall, like I said, the episode was very nice. I enjoyed it, and the comedy was there, and then they kind of pulled you away from that and really stuck you with some very serious moments, like with Wyatt and Judd and Tommy coming together at the ending of the episode, and Owen and his brother, and then having TK have that realization of a happy ending. It's really incredible. Don't forget to smash the like button until you can't smash it anymore. Comment down below, and I'll be sure to respond to each and every one of them, and subscribe. Peace out.
I cannot complain, because today, I'm doing my thing.